When you begin to wake up spiritually, it doesn't happen all at once. It's not a lightning bolt, it's not an overnight transformation. It's a series of choices, quiet, intentional choices, that slowly strip away the things that no longer serve you, the toxic habits, the destructive patterns, beliefs that keep you small. You don't wake up one day fully free. You free yourself piece by piece, and that's what powerful women do. They recognize what drains their energy, what steals their peace, and they choose, sometimes painfully, sometimes slowly, to let it go. When you live your life constantly seeking the approval of others, you give away your power without even realizing it. Every decision you make, every word you speak, every step you take becomes filtered through the question of whether someone else will like it, accept it, or validate it. That need to be liked, to be approved of, to be validated, it's a quiet prison. The bars are invisible, but they're real, and they keep you from stepping fully into who you are meant to be. Spiritually awake women begin to see this trap for what it is. They recognize that as long as their sense of self is tethered to someone else's opinion, they will never truly be free. Approval is fickle. People's standards change with their moods, their own insecurities, and their own agendas. You can spend your whole life bending and twisting yourself to fit someone else's version of acceptable, and still they may never give you the approval you crave. Worse yet, even if you get it, it doesn't last. Approval is like water poured into a leaking bucket. It feels good in the moment, but it drains away, leaving you empty again. When you begin to awaken, you start to understand that your worth was never meant to be outsourced. It is not a currency that others get to distribute. It is something that is already within you, rooted in your values, your integrity, and your truth. Seeking approval constantly pulls you out of alignment with that truth. You begin to say yes when you mean no, you smile when you want to cry, you show up in ways that feel unnatural just to avoid conflict or judgment. Over time, that disconnect eats away at your spirit. The cost is enormous. Your peace, your authenticity, your self-respect. Approval chasing doesn't just steal your freedom, it steals your identity. You become a version of yourself that isn't even real, and deep down, you know it. Spiritually awake women learn to shift this pattern slowly. It doesn't happen overnight. At first, you may still feel that pang of fear when someone disapproves of you. You may still hear that voice in your head that tells you you're only as good as the praise you receive. But piece by piece, you learn to stand in your truth without waiting for applause. You learn to let silence or even criticism meet you without shattering your sense of self. The power is in reclaiming your own internal compass, the one that tells you what's right, what's true, and what's worthy of your energy. When you stop needing everyone's approval, you finally start to live for the approval of one person, yourself. And that approval is steady. It doesn't fade with the shifting tides of other people's opinions. It anchors you, it centers you, and it gives you the courage to keep walking your path even when others don't understand it. This is the moment when you stop performing for the world and start living as your most authentic self, no longer defined by the fleeting validation of others. When you constantly shrink your voice to keep the peace, you silence the very essence of who you are. You tell yourself it's easier this way, that avoiding conflict will protect relationships, that keeping quiet will make life smoother. But deep down, you feel the weight of everything you don't say. Every unspoken truth, every swallowed opinion, every moment you deny your own perspective begins to build up like a heavy stone pressing against your spirit. Over time, this quiet compliance doesn't bring peace at all, it creates inner turmoil. You end up living in a state of contradiction, projecting harmony outwardly while feeling resentment inwardly, and that dissonance eats away at your confidence, your joy, and your connection to your authentic self. Spiritually awake women recognize that their voice is not a weapon to be feared, but a gift meant to be used. When you silence yourself for the comfort of others, you are essentially telling yourself that your feelings don't matter, that your truth is less valuable than someone else's comfort. That is not peace, that is suppression. Real peace is not the absence of conflict, it is the presence of truth. It is the ability to express yourself fully and honestly while maintaining respect for others. It is the courage to speak up, even when your words may not be welcomed, because silence would betray your own soul. Learning to honor your voice is not about becoming loud or aggressive, it is about becoming aligned. It is about understanding that what you have to say carries weight, and that holding it back diminishes not only your power, but also the integrity of your relationships. When you consistently keep your voice small, people may think you are agreeable, easy to be around, even selfless. But inside, you know the truth. You know that the peace you are maintaining is fragile and false. You know that by not speaking, you are betraying yourself in subtle but significant ways. And with every betrayal, your self-worth erodes just a little bit more. The fear of being disliked, misunderstood, or rejected keeps you locked in a pattern where silence feels safer than honesty. But safety is not the same as freedom, and spiritually awake women crave freedom, freedom to express, to stand firm, to exist unapologetically. The awakening process teaches you that your voice matters not because it always changes outcomes, but because it changes you. Every time you speak your truth, even if it shakes, you reclaim a piece of your power. Every time you stand in your authenticity, even if others disapprove, you strengthen the foundation of your self-respect. Your voice is not meant to be hidden in the shadows of someone else's comfort zone. It is meant to shine a light, to set boundaries, to draw lines that honor your values and your worth. And when you begin to practice this even slowly, even imperfectly, you will feel the shift. You will feel lighter, stronger, and more aligned. The false peace of silence will no longer tempt you, because you will know the real peace that comes from living in your truth. And once you experience that, there is no going back. When you attach your worth to relationships, you hand over control of your identity to forces outside of yourself. You begin to measure your value by how much someone else loves you, needs you, or validates you. Every smile, every compliment, every display of affection feels like proof that you matter, while every rejection, criticism, or absence feels like evidence that you are not enough. This cycle is exhausting because it leaves your sense of self entirely dependent on the actions of others, something you can never fully control. Spiritually awake women eventually realize this is a dangerous game, one that will keep them trapped in emotional highs and lows, never truly secure, never truly whole. When your worth is tied to whether a relationship succeeds or fails, you start compromising pieces of yourself to keep it alive. You settle for less than you deserve, you ignore red flags, and you tolerate behavior that wounds your spirit, all in the name of holding on. You tell yourself that if you can just fix things, if you can just be good enough, then you'll finally feel secure. But this belief places your self-worth in someone else's hands, and no one, not a partner, not a friend, not even family, should ever hold that much power over who you are. True worth can never come from another person because people are fallible, inconsistent, and temporary. If your value rises and falls with their actions, you'll never find peace. Awakening means understanding that love is beautiful, but it is not the source of your worth. Relationships can enrich your life, but they cannot define it. Spiritually awake women start to see that they are complete on their own, that their worth exists independent of anyone's love or validation. This doesn't mean they reject relationships or close themselves off. It means they enter them from a place of wholeness rather than desperation. They love deeply, but not at the expense of their identity. They give freely, but not by abandoning themselves. They stay connected, but not at the cost of their self-respect. Detaching your worth from relationships doesn't mean you stop caring about people. It means you stop making their behavior the mirror that reflects your value. When someone treats you poorly, it says something about them, not about you. When a relationship ends, it is not a declaration that you are unworthy. It is simply a chapter closing. When someone loves you, that love is a gift to be cherished, but not a certificate of your value. You were worthy before they came into your life, and you remain worthy if they leave. This shift in perspective is where true freedom begins. It takes time and practice to untangle your self-worth from the people around you. There will be moments when old patterns resurface, when you feel the urge to cling, to overgive, to prove your value. But with every step you take towards self-recognition, you build a stronger foundation. You learn to validate yourself first, to fill your own cup, and to trust that you are enough regardless of who chooses to stay or go. And when you stand in that truth, relationships become healthier because they are no longer rooted in fear or need. They are grounded in choice, respect, and authenticity. That is the gift of awakening, discovering that your worth has always been within you, untouchable and unshakable, no matter who walks into or out of your life. When you carry guilt that doesn't belong to you, you carry a weight that was never meant to be yours. It creeps into your thoughts when you replay conversations second, guess your choices, or feel responsible for how others react. You apologize for things that weren't your fault, you take on blame that doesn't fit, and you convince yourself that if only you had done more, said more, or been more, things would have turned out differently. This kind of guilt is like a shadow that follows you everywhere, keeping you from standing tall in your own light. Spiritually awake women begin to recognize that much of the guilt they carry was never truly theirs. It was projected onto them by people who refused to carry the weight of their own actions, emotions, or choices. When you hold onto this false guilt, you live your life in a constant state of over-responsibility. You feel like it's your job to fix everyone, to make them happy, to smooth over conflicts, and to absorb the discomfort in every room. You become the one who bends, who sacrifices, who absorbs the pain of others to keep them comfortable. But the truth is, no matter how much you do, it is never enough to make someone else whole. Their healing is not your assignment. Their unhappiness is not proof of your failure. Carrying their guilt doesn't make you stronger. It just keeps you small, tired, and disconnected from yourself. The awakening process brings clarity. You begin to see where the guilt really belongs. You start to notice the patterns, the parent who laid their burdens on you as a child, the partner who made you feel at fault for their mistakes, the friends or co-workers who used your empathy to avoid their own accountability. You see it for what it is, misplaced responsibility, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Slowly, you learn to hand back what was never yours to carry. You realize that being compassionate does not mean being a dumping ground, and being kind does not mean sacrificing your own peace for someone else's choices. Letting go of false guilt doesn't mean you stop caring about people. It means you start caring about yourself just as much. It means you start asking, is this really mine to hold? And when the answer is no, you give yourself permission to put it down. You stop apologizing for existing, for having boundaries, for saying no. You stop shrinking to make others feel comfortable. You stop replaying scenarios where you take on blame that was never yours. Instead, you start living from a place of truth and balance. You take responsibility for your actions, yes, but only your actions, not the choices, emotions, or outcomes of others. It takes courage to release guilt because sometimes it feels like letting go of control. You fear that if you stop carrying it, people might see you as selfish, cold, or unkind, but the opposite is true. When you free yourself from guilt that doesn't belong to you, you create space for authenticity, for genuine care, and for healthy relationships built on respect rather than obligation. You can still support others, but you do it without sacrificing your own spirit. You can still love deeply, but it is a love that comes from freedom, not from chains. That freedom is what spiritually awake women seek, because they know they were never meant to live bowed under the weight of someone else's burdens. They were meant to rise unbound, carrying only what is truly theirs to carry. When you fear the loss of what was never truly yours, you keep yourself bound to illusions that drain your strength. You cling to people, opportunities, or identities that were never meant to stay, convincing yourself that without them you will crumble. The fear becomes so strong that you grip tighter, even when your intuition whispers that it's slipping away because it was never aligned with your truth. Spiritually awake women learn to recognize this fear for what it really is, not a sign of love or loyalty, but a sign of attachment to something that doesn't belong to their journey. When you fear losing what was never yours, you're not protecting your future, you're holding yourself back from it. This fear often comes from the belief that without certain people or circumstances, you won't be whole. You may convince yourself that a partner defines your happiness, that a job validates your worth, or that a role you've outgrown gives you purpose. Deep down, though, you know these things were never truly yours to claim forever. They were chapters, not the entire story. They were lessons, not lifelines. Yet when you grip them tightly, you keep yourself from receiving what is truly meant for you. You can't reach for what's ahead if your hands are still holding onto what was never real or never permanent. Awakening means stepping into a higher awareness that loss is not the end, but a transition. Spiritually awake women begin to see that what leaves was not meant to destroy them, but to redirect them. That person who walked away, that door that closed, that identity that fell apart, all of it was part of the shedding process. When you stop fearing the loss of what isn't yours, you begin to understand that life is not about clinging, it's about evolving. You don't lose what is meant for you because what is meant for you will align with your growth, not resist it. What leaves does so because it cannot move with you into the next stage of your becoming. The fear of loss often disguises itself as love, loyalty, or dedication. But real love doesn't chain you to fear. Real love flows, it breathes, it allows freedom. When you stay in spaces where your soul is shrinking just because you fear the emptiness that might come if you leave, you rob yourself of expansion. You fill your life with placeholders instead of promises, with illusions instead of truth. The pain of letting go is real, but the pain of holding onto what was never truly yours is far heavier. Every time you refuse to release what no longer belongs, you choose stagnation over transformation. The shift happens when you realize that nothing truly meant for you can be lost. Opportunities that align with your purpose will reappear in different forms. Relationships that are built on truth will withstand time and growth. Identities that resonate with your spirit will expand as you do, but the things that were never yours to keep will fall away, and that's not punishment, it's protection. It's the universe, God, or life itself clearing space for something greater. Spiritually awake women embrace this truth even when it stings. They lean into trust instead of fear, surrender instead of control. They release their grip, knowing that empty hands are not a sign of failure, but a sign they are ready to receive what was always meant to be theirs. In that release, fear loses its hold and freedom takes its place.